Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon to the Renfrew Center Foundation's webinar, Trigger or Treat, Recovery During Halloween. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Erin Byerly, and I am your Alumni Services Coordinator and will be your moderator for today's online presentation. So I would like to now introduce you all to today's presenter. So Erica Butler, MA LMFT, is the Site Director at the Renfrew Center of Charlotte. Erica received dual bachelor's degrees in psychology and criminology from Slippery Rock University and her master's degree in marriage and family therapy from Seton Hill University. Additionally, Erica is working as a PhD candidate with her dissertation addressing cultural competence in community-based programs treating anorexia. Prior to joining Renfrew, Erica served as the Director of Children's Community-Based Services, overseeing autism services, therapeutic foster care, and outpatient therapy for children. Additionally, Erica worked as the Clinical Director for an Inmate Partner Violence Prevention Program and was previously an Outpatient Supervisor, Assistant Clinical Director for a residential treatment facility, a drug and alcohol therapist, and a couples therapist. She is also a member of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists and is pursuing her AAMFT approved supervisor title. So I'm so excited to hear from Erica today, and we'll turn it over to Erica.
Thanks, Erin. Hi, everybody. Like Erin just said, I'm Erica Butler. I'm the site director here at the Renfrew Center of Charlotte. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys about Trigger or Treat and some recovery tips during Halloween, since we are approaching that time of year. So we can go ahead and get started. So let's first talk about, why recovery could be a difficult time for folks in recovery. So holidays in general can bring to the forefront any dysfunction or healthy dynamics that are present in families that could otherwise fly under the radar at different times in the year. So in other years, if you coped with these difficult emotions by using disordered eating, it can be difficult to manage these stressors in different ways now that you are in recovery. But Halloween is and can still be fun, even during recovery. And Halloween is often really seen as the start of the holiday season. So let's kick it off by consciously making some pro-recovery decisions that support your goals. Let's talk about one of the first stressors. So I know when people normally think about Halloween, the candy and the goodies is second thought. So that's normally first. So let's talk about one of the best or hardest parts, the candy, and why it's important to prepare for a treat-focused holiday, no matter your life stage. So candy will always make an appearance in Halloween, regardless of where you're at. So in childhood, that could mean coming home from trick-or-treating with a pillowcase or a jack-o'-lantern full of caramels and chocolates. In college, there could be Halloween parties. And I know in college, that's when Halloween becomes cool again. So celebrating that way. And then later in life, you could find yourself passing out candies to trick-or-treaters. That means having it in your home or attending a Halloween party with your colleagues or at work there too. So another topic of Halloween that folks often want to talk about is Halloween treats and binge eating specifically. So for many that are on the road to eating disorder recovery, the treats of Halloween might have felt entirely off limits at one point in your life. So some of the ghosts of disordered thoughts about candy often creep up during this season. So we here at Renfrew really encourage you to allow yourself some Halloween candy, especially for those early in your recovery. This can be a challenge to allow yourself to have those foods that were once off limits. So really stepping into that challenge, inviting yourself to enjoy the treats of the holiday can be really important. It's also important to keep in mind that enjoying some Halloween candy does not require total overhaul of your eating patterns or your pro-recovery decision making. You don't have to compensate or alter your food choices due to your pro-recovery choice to eat the candy. I also want to remind you to start noticing if the urges come up to modify your choices after consuming some holiday treats, And if those urges do arise, you can work on focusing your awareness of that urge rather acting upon it. So we can talk about an action plan for binge eating. The first thing that I would recommend would be to practice some mindful eating. And this really starts with allowing yourself to use all of your senses and choosing to eat foods that satisfy you while nourishing your body at the same time. You have the opportunity to acknowledge your genuine responses to food, such as your true likes and dislikes, without any judgment. We want you to be able to eat with awareness of your senses. Another tip is to remember to have regular snacks and meals throughout the day. Try following your meal plan that you've worked on with your team. This looks like eating 3 regular meals and 2 snacks that can prevent those cravings that lead to overeating and binging on Halloween. So having a game plan for a potluck that you go to, that means looking at all the foods before you take a plate, figuring out which foods seem the most appetizing to you and which foods you know you're hungry for. Plating your food, allowing yourself to enjoy what you're eating, can also really give yourself permission to enjoy and stop eating when you feel satisfied. Feeling empowered to use your voice and seeking some support here also looks like identifying who your support system is going to be for Halloween festivities, using those supports to really strategize on what type of help you might need and what that'll look like. So some of that is just really talking about your needs and what you're really looking for from your support system. And then practicing self-compassion is one of my favorites. So when you start experiencing feelings of guilt or shame that might arise, practicing some self-compassion can really look like acting the same way towards yourself when you're having a difficult time, maybe when you fail, notice something you don't like about yourself. And instead of ignoring your pain with like a stiff upper lip, rub some dirt in it mentality, taking some time and telling yourself, this is really difficult right now. How can I comfort and care for myself in this moment? And one of our therapists here at the Renfrew Center always likes to say, talk to yourself like you would talk to someone that you love. So really, speaking to yourself in that really kind language can make the difference when you're in a tough time. So another topic that can be difficult for some folks is Halloween costumes and body neutrality. So costumes can also be a tough time for folks in recovery. Costumes in stores often come in one size fits all sort of packaging. There could be the desire to dress like a certain character that might have a different body type than you. You might be feeling pressured to dress more revealing than you normally would in other times of the year, which can bring up some feelings. So thinking about your body in a costume also might contribute to urges for disordered eating or also some compensation. So that can be a really big challenge for families as well. So some ideas to ease costume stressors. So as we sort of talked about earlier, there is some self-comparison that can happen. And the National Eating Disorders Association, so that's NEDA, also mentions that as well. So they said that seeing others in Halloween costumes can lead to self-comparison for folks that are in recovery. So many people who wear revealing costumes that can affect self-esteem and make people feel insecure. So some ideas words are hard. Some alternatives to wearing a costume while still taking part in the festivities include wearing a Halloween themed t-shirt, or you could find some cute pumpkin earrings, or accessorizing with headband, costume ears, makeup, or anything else that makes you feel included but still comfortable. And as always, the hope for recovery is having everybody feel comfortable and confident in what they're wearing, and reducing those pressures to dress a certain way. So another topic that always comes up around Halloween is alcohol consumption. So I know we talked a lot about candy, being really prevalent in Halloween. We also know that alcohol and parties are also a really big factor too. And so it might seem like everyone is drinking on Halloween, but we do want to reiterate that sobriety is the best choice while you're working to navigate what recovery looks like for you. And intoxication can really sometimes be a trigger for disordered food behaviors or even used as a harmful coping tool. So we know that alcohol lowers inhibition. So some of those things that you know that you want to focus on in recovery might take the back seat if you have been drinking. So we can talk about some tips for staying sober this Halloween. So I think one of the biggest pieces for this would be finding other folks to hang out with if your main friend group plans on drinking. And I know that can be tricky for a lot of people if you've got your steady friend group, but I really do feel confident that there are folks that don't drink on Halloween that you could hang out with. Or I'm sure if you are a teenager or college age, your parents would love to hang out with you and not drink with you if that would be an option too. So also it's important to avoid situations where alcohol is easily accessible. Sometimes that pressure really is hard for everybody to navigate. And also avoiding environments that you used to drink in. So if last year when you were not in your recovery journey and you went to a bar or party, maybe it could be a good choice for you to avoid those situations that you associate with drinking. And then we included a little pro tip that includes making a list of drinking triggers for this Halloween. So anything that could prompt you to want to drink. So sights, smells, people, anything like that. And then you can review the list when you're making Halloween plans to make sure that that choice aligns with your goals and wouldn't be a trigger for you to drink alcohol. So some other tried and true tips that we always like to share is whether someone is trick-or-treating or passing out candy, it's often helpful to do these activities with a friend or a loved one. So social settings, especially with food, can be overwhelming. So having a close, trustworthy friend that is invested in your recovery can provide support will be really beneficial. Friends can also help with encouraging folks in recovery to not act on potential eating disorder behaviors or any urges that could come up. It's also important to not alter your meal plan or to compensate for any food. Although the holidays can be challenging for folks in recovery, meal plans should not be modified unless you're sort of working that out with your team or instructed by your dietitian. Your treatment team should really help you incorporate some Halloween snacks into your meal plan and approaching it from an all foods fit perspective. And also speaking on food, so having planned out meals can help prevent any binging episodes, which could also occur as a result from food restriction. Prior to treatment, many folks only eat certain foods if they engage in compensation to offset the calories consumed. So instead, folks should work to eat intuitively, not label foods as good or bad, or feel like they need to make up for food through restricting, exercising, or any purging. Also suggesting some different activities. So the amount of candy and desserts associated with Halloween can be triggering, like we said. Friends and loved ones can also engage in different, so non-food activities, like watching a Halloween movie, carving or decorating pumpkins, going to a haunted house, pumpkin patch, or just simply staying home. That's always an option too. Like we said, it's important to practice self-care and really do what's best for you throughout the holidays. And then using some strategies. So if you did participate in Run-Free Recovery, we do use the UT model. So using some of those strategies that you know and those skills that you've learned here can be really important. So if the socialization and food aspect of Halloween is anxiety provoking, folks can use their skills in UT like an arc or a downward arrow to really get better insight of what's coming up. You can also talk to someone, get some fresh air, or practice some breathing techniques And it's really important to remember that Halloween can be challenging. And if event is too triggering, it's okay to leave. And of course, that's not specific to Halloween. That's always. So at the end of the day, it's really important to celebrate the holidays in ways that are meaningful and special to you. That might mean going to the party with your best friend, eating mindfully. It also can mean totally skipping the parties together and taking some little folks, little toddlers or your nieces and nephews or whoever's in your life trick-or-treating. Or staying at home and watching a movie with a person that's important to you in your life. It's really up to you on what this looks like. So again, with the self-care, you can tell this is one of my favorite topics, and self-compassion. It's really at the root of recovery. So spending time with folks with support you in your recovery, curbing your alcohol consumption, and giving yourself some real permission to enjoy that Snickers is going to make all of the difference this Halloween season. So I know we were pretty quick on that, but I'm happy to use some of our time to go over any questions, any thoughts, any concerns, or anything that you would like to know more on about the Halloween season and recovery.
Thank you so much, Erica. That was really great. And like we said, we do have time for questions. So if there is a chance, if anyone has questions, you can just put it in the chat feature. And I know we've gotten a couple so far, so we can get started with those. So, kind of thinking, Erica, you brought up kind of the idea of drinking and how that plays into recovery. And, like anyone who's gone through treatment with us knows, we say, no drinking during treatment, just because, whether or not it's something someone struggled with in the past, we know that it will dampen down those emotions that we're feeling and can help people kind of numb out. And when we're working so hard on learning how to lean into those emotions and learning how to be aware of those different emotions, how do we know, like, when we're in a place in recovery where we can start to kind of drink again, or, go out to a party where there is alcohol? What could people do to kind of gauge where they are, if that's something they're ready for?
It's a really good question that comes up a lot. So the first thing that I would recommend is definitely consulting your team. So I think that your team is always vital in recovery. And I think that your team could help you walk through what your motivation or what that urge for drinking what could be behind that. Is it, are you trying to drink to manage some emotions, so manage some anxiety? Your team could help you process that. Are you wanting to drink to fit in with your peers? Are you wanting to drink to better connect socially to somebody? So I think really working with your team to navigate if you are in a good spot to maybe try alcohol, and what those motivations would be, I think would be really important in finding the answer to that.
Yeah, I love that idea of the team, and then like looking at like, okay, what is my motivation? What is the intention?
Yeah.
Is this something where it's like, well, I'm still struggling a bit with my social anxiety,
Yes,
so that's a way to make it a little less intense? And it's like, that's not really what we want to do. We want to be leaning into that anxiety a little bit more and really feeling it. So I definitely agree, that idea of intention. And I think that is such an important part around that. And, being able to have a drink if that's something that, you feel comfortable with, and tolerating, okay, also, what's the intention around not drinking? I'm even thinking right now, like, is it, well, I'm worried about what that'll do to my body or how that'll impact me in terms of weight and things like that. And making sure we're not saying, well, I just won't, because we're avoiding those emotions as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely not. And that's why I think the team piece to really get in there and help you navigate what's coming up around alcohol to get a clearer picture and to help you make a plan. So if you guys do decide, maybe you could drink on Halloween, making a plan to know your limits. What's this going to look like? How do you have a safe ride home? All of those factors are going to be really important.
Yeah, there's so many things to consider. And I think that's the big thing. It's like, it's not just a spur of the moment decision. It's, okay, let me look at like what's going on for me emotionally, what's going on for me logistically, and all of that. Yeah,
I
sure.
think being a planner in this situation is going to be the best choice.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that's so true with just things in recovery in general. Like we do have to be a little bit more thoughtful, especially early on in recovery, especially if, we're just in that newer stage, which can last a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Having some guidelines is going to be really helpful.
Yeah. Thinking of guidelines, grocery shopping already can be hard in recovery. There's a lot of options. It can be very overstimulating. I mean, just for me going into certain grocery stores, I'm like, there's too much going on here, too many people, I'm running into them, like all of that. But then you throw in, around the holidays and especially around Halloween, I can think like before Halloween, there's a lot of candy around and they're selling it and all of that. And then after Halloween, it's usually everything's going on sale and they're trying to move it out. They're putting it in the front of the store. They're really pushing it a little bit more. Any tips for like what people can do to kind of, notice the emotions that are coming up and maybe even help tolerate those emotions around kind of seeing the candy in the store and maybe feeling like, oh, well, this would be a good way to, get some exchanges in now that it's half price or things like that.
Yeah. So I think really, again, leaning on that team. So I think sort of like we talked about earlier, if your experience previously in Halloween is that I can't have any of these treats, those are totally off limits, shifting that perspective to enjoying the Snickers, to really listen to your body with what's coming up and making note of that so you can talk to your team about what happened today. So today I went into Trader Joe's and there was all of this stuff, and so really labeling some of those feelings so your team can really help you unpack some of that stuff and figure out a way for you to still enjoy them and handle what comes next afterwards, after eating them too, I think is going to be really important.
Yeah, I think that's such a great piece. And like noticing like, what does come up for you if you've got a whole bag in the house, like how does that impact you? We want to be able to do that so that we're not depriving ourselves, right? And like being aware of what are those emotions and how do I handle them?
Yeah, and doing some food emotions too, I think could be really helpful. So if you are eating the Twix bar or the Snickers, what's coming up while you're eating it? Are there any feelings arising during, beginning, during, after? Sort of, I think giving your team a clear picture of that so they know how to best support you, I think is going to be really great.
Yeah. Thinking about support for, when we have family at home or we have just supports around, how do we find support in like costume shopping or having that comparison of getting ready with friends and maybe our costume's different than what they're doing because of where we're comfortable. Like what support can we find or how can we find support, I guess is a better question around costume shopping.
Shopping is hard. So I definitely can hear that costume shopping is a really big trigger for a lot of people. So I would recommend for families specifically to, again, go in with a plan. So I think talking to your child, so if I was a mom in this situation, I would first talk to my child. So what are you thinking about being for Halloween? Do you want to dress up? So I think trying to figure out, would it be more comfortable for your child to do the Halloween themed t-shirt, headband, that type of look rather than a costume could be important. If your child does want to wear a costume, I think going in with a plan of what you're going to look for, what makes sense, and then also encouraging your child again to plan with the team about motivations, reason for wanting to dress up in a certain outfit or to do a certain thing, I think is going to be important. And then if your child has any friends that have been really supportive for them in recovery, I think encouraging your child to have that friend come along costume shopping, because I can remember when my mom would tell me outfits looked cute. I'm like, I don't feel like you know it looks cute, Mom. So having a friend that has been really supportive of your child's journey come along Halloween costume shopping, or even going in a matching outfit as that peer, can really boost some confidence and make things feel a little more comfortable.
Yeah, I love that idea of like having supports and having people. And I'm even thinking like, having everyone do kind of maybe even a group costume or a coordinated costume in an area that you feel comfortable with, and kind of being the one to lead that charge. What about though if you live with either friends that maybe want to do a group costume, or you live with family that want to do these kind of traditional like Halloween activities or something like that you just don't feel ready to do yet? How do we communicate that to our family and let them know, like, I'm not there yet?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It can be really difficult for folks to articulate what they're needing to their loved ones, especially if these are traditions that you've done every year, or things that other people in your family or social circle could really enjoy doing. It might not feel like an easy conversation, but I think it's important and necessary to have. So I would assume that folks in your family want you to stay in recovery, they want to support you, and they love you. And articulating your needs: I don't really feel like I'm ready to do X, Y, and Z this year. Is there a chance that we could watch a movie, go to a pumpkin patch, or do whatever replacement activity instead? I think is going to be really important. And I also believe that our eating disorders sometimes encourage us to stay in silence. So they're very wanting us to say nothing, that they will not be happy with that. That's not the truth. So I think looping people into what you're needing and having them help you is going to be the piece of success here.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point of like just speaking up, that there might be other people who are like, oh thank God, like I really didn't want to do that either.
Right. I highly doubt you are the only person in the group that didn't want to go to that party, or didn't want to do whatever the activity is. And I think, you being the one to speak up, and even if they still want to do that, that's okay. And that would be their choice too. But I think always putting, yourself first and making those pro-recovery decisions is the best you can do.
So if we kind of put all of these things in place, and yet we still end up engaging in some behaviors,
Yeah.
what tips do you have if somebody does binge, or if somebody does restrict and kind of get rid of their Halloween costume or something like that? Like what tips do we have if, we've tried all of our things and it didn't work?
Yeah. So my first tip would always be self-compassion, like we talked about, because recovery is not linear. So sometimes things do happen, and it is okay. So I would lean on your team. I would be open and honest about what happened, what led to these behaviors. If you have any ideas about what was going on behind the behavior, helping your team navigate that with you. But I think the biggest piece is giving yourself grace and working with your team to figure out, okay, this happened. Is there a chance that it could happen again in the future? Did we maybe miss this piece when we were planning? So maybe when we plan for Thanksgiving or whatever the next holiday would be, can we approach it a little bit differently, and making those ideas for the future? But I think the support piece, and not keeping this secret to yourself, is going to be the most helpful.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point of like, honoring the fact that recovery is not a straight line, and it's not linear, and there are slip ups, and that means it's a chance for us to process and figure out what happened. Where did we get tripped up? What led to it? What emotions were coming up for us, and really learn and grow from that.
Yeah. And Halloween happens every year. So I think every year is an opportunity to try again, to continue on in your new pro recovery mindset. So I think really reminding yourself and giving yourself some grace while you're navigating this, especially if it's new, it is going to be great.
Yeah, for sure. What are your thoughts on kind of somebody treating Halloween as like an exposure for trying fear foods or wearing something that maybe is a little different than what we've been comfortable wearing?
I love that. I would invite that person to make sure that they have, again, that support. So I think exposures on your own can be a really slippery slope unless it's been pre-planned and thought out with your therapist, your dietitian, or psych team, if that feels important to loop them into. But I think making sure that it's an exposure that's appropriate for where you're at in recovery. And I think your therapist and dietitian would be able to help you navigate that. But this is a really good time of the year to try some of that stuff. So to wear a costume that maybe your eating disorder thoughts would never let you try on, or to have some of the Halloween goodies that you've never gotten to try, could be a great time for that if appropriate to do so.
Yeah, I love that idea of like making it a plan and kind of being very thoughtful about it and things like that. Yeah. What if we kind of get through Halloween? Maybe we act on behaviors or don't act on behaviors, but we've recognized that maybe we are struggling a little bit more than we previously thought. Kind of what are options for support after that point?
Well, what I would tell that person is they would not be alone. So sometimes in the holidays, even just being around your support systems more, they could notice maybe some of the patterns that are either new or old behaviors that maybe would indicate some more support is needed. And in that instance, I would encourage someone to reach out and maybe touch base with a higher level of care, maybe get an assessment at a facility to see if maybe more support is needed, or reaching back out to some of those virtual outpatient groups. Any way that you can sort of weave in more recovery like-minded folks, I think is going to really help during the holidays.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially just having that awareness, this is, for some of us, this is the first holiday in what is our holiday season. For some of us, it's like we're already in it.
Yeah.
But that idea of like recognizing, okay, things are going to continue. And if I can have this awareness early on, can I start to get that more support as we move forward so that things feel different as I continue to move forward?
Yeah, and I think reaching out for that initial support might be the scariest piece of, okay, if I already worked with my team and I'm reaching back out, does that mean I failed? But I think that is the most important step that you can take in recognizing, like, okay, maybe I've fallen off of my meal plan. This isn't quite happening how it used to. And being really honest and transparent with your team so they know how to support you the best, or to refer you to a higher level of care, whatever that would look like. That's the most pivotal point.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mean, it all starts with awareness. Without that, we're not going to be able to do anything. And I think that is, such an important piece. One of the other questions we have coming in is just about, some of those messages people have around candy and Halloween candy and kind of those diet culture things we might be hearing either at work or with our family, and any tips on how to kind of push back against that, how to kind of handle, when people are coming in and they're saying stuff about the candy of like, oh, my kids got so much candy last night, I was so bad. And, we're sitting there being like, oh my gosh, there's no morality with food. But kind of how to handle those situations.
Yeah. And I think that depends on, always want folks to, if you are going to respond back to somebody in an attempt to educate, to make sure always that the situation feels safe, both emotionally and physically, to respond and maybe take that opportunity to educate that person. So if you do feel like this is an opportunity to touch base with them about an all foods fit and a no morality assigned to food, that could be the first time that they've ever heard that message. And could really shift their perspective. If you don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, I think it's okay to model that way that you speak about enjoying candy, and intuitively eating, and that all foods fit, and all of those really important things that I just mentioned, I think that's your opportunity to maybe shift their thinking in that way. So modeling how you talk, because a lot of times the only person whose behavior we can control would be our own. So everybody else, just have to navigate situation by situation on would be the best way to approach that. And also, if you don't feel comfortable saying anything, that's okay too. I would touch base with your therapist to sort of, again, unpack some of that situation, and maybe they could offer situation specific advice for next time on how to handle that, especially if it's some family dynamics that have been years and years in the making. Some of this generic advice that I gave might not fit for your specific situation, and you might need your specific therapist to help you with that one.
Yeah, definitely. Because we know those beliefs are hard, and they're well worn for a lot of people in our lives. Yeah. And I even thought, like, making sure we're following on like social media accounts that are going to promote that same kind of thinking, like making sure if we're not already following the Renfrew Center, we are, so that we have that. But even other accounts that, I've seen things posted, like, reminder, like, Halloween candy is not a bad thing. Like, that is not the scariest thing that's happening that night. So, like, let's remember that.
I agree with that. And I think our phones are so attached to us that, I totally agree with you that making sure that we're following accounts that align with our recovery goals is going to be really helpful, because if not, you're going to be flooded with messages that might be really hard to decipher and make sense of. So I think it's just easier to see the good stuff about recovery and making pro-recovery choices.
Yeah. We got another question just asking about, like, if we are still in a place where we have to avoid a lot of triggers this Halloween, maybe we're not dressing up, maybe we're not going trick-or-treating, we're not going to parties. Does that mean we're not progressing?
I would say no. So I don't believe that. I don't believe that means you're not progressing. I believe that means you are meeting yourself where you're at right now in recovery. And I think understanding where you're at in recovery is super important. Not pushing yourself if you're not in a space to do so. If you're just okay with where you're at, you're meeting exchanges, your team is agreeing that that's the best choice to maybe just lay low this year. I think that's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think recognizing what our limits are and kind of where we get to that point of, like, okay, I'm outside the window of tolerance, that's an important piece of progress.
Yeah. And I think even just recognizing that I'm just not there this year for Halloween. Next year, like I sort of said earlier, every year Halloween comes around. So if this is not your year, maybe next year is not your year, maybe the year after, but if not, that's okay too. I'm sure you're seeing progress in many other areas that are important to highlight.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know. I even think about just my own progress with leaning into my fear emotion when I watch scary movies and being like, okay, I'm not going to cover my eyes quite as quickly as I normally would. And that can be the progress sometimes that we're seeing.
Yeah, little victories. Absolutely.
Yep. For sure. Well, thank you so much, Erica, for this presentation today. I think it was so timely and important. And if you do have any additional questions about this webinar or really any of our support services, please feel free to email us at alumni@renfrewcenter.com. But on behalf of the Renfrew Center Foundation and Erica and myself, I would like to thank you all for coming today and participating in today's webinar.